Metropolitan Chicago is one of the most religiously diverse areas in the world, and for more than a half century, Sanctuary has reported and reflected on our faith-filled community. Sanctuary tells stories of faith from both inside our houses of worship to the streets and neighborhoods where faith is acted out every day with acts of kindness and concern. From food pantries to peace initiatives, from worship services to servicing the poor, Sanctuary has a proud history of reporting on the goodness that flows from our faith traditions. Watch Sanctuary every Sunday at 12 noon.
Ahead on Sanctuary, how to protect the safety and security of local faith communities.
Welcome to Sanctuary, bringing you conversation and stories at the intersection of life and faith. This edition of Sanctuary is produced in cooperation with the Council of Religious Leaders of Metropolitan Chicago.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Sanctuary. I'm Nisan Chavkin, Executive Director of the Council of Religious Leaders of Metropolitan Chicago. November is normally a month of celebration and Thanksgiving in our community, but these are not normal times. In this turbulent moment, faith communities are concerned that they might be targeted because of what they believe, where they live, and where the community is, or simply because of who they are. Today on Sanctuary, our two guests will help us understand some of the challenges confronting faith communities today and discuss different resources available to faith communities to help them protect their places of worship, their schools, and their members. In the first part of our episode, I'll speak with Charles DuShane, Protective Security Advisor for the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency of the United States Department of Homeland Security. And in the second half of our episode, I will speak with Father Jerry Boland, pastor of Our Lady of Perpetual Help Catholic Church in Glenview. Our first guest, as I said, is Charles DuShane of this government agency called the CISA, which is the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. And it is America's cyber defense agency and the national coordinator for infrastructure and critical response in those kinds of issues. And it deals with physical security, cybersecurity, and infrastructure, all the stuff we rely on every day as Americans. So my first question for Mr. DuShane is, after I welcome you here, and I'm glad you came, is how are faith institutions part of the critical infrastructure of the United States of America?
Thank you, and good morning, and for the opportunity for CISA to partake in this program and have a very timely and sensitive conversation about the risks that our faith-based organizations are at threats and the threats they are receiving. So how do faith-based organizations, why are they considered critical infrastructure? Mm-hmm. Think of a faith-based organization as the fabric of our American society. You know, whether it's a house of worship, a faith-based organization, a community center, people rely on those institutions every day and every hour of their life. Mm-hmm. And CISA is here to help secure those locations and create a feeling of safety within them.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, that's good, and it's very helpful. So what is it that CISA does? What do you provide?
So to the faith-based and organizations, CISA offers various resources that are available online to owner-operators, stakeholders. We also conduct physical assessments in person. What we do is we go out and we have a conversation with a faith-based organization. And during that conversation, we try to identify areas that the congregation could be at risk. And I use a tool, it's called a SAFE, a security assessment at first entry, which identifies certain vulnerabilities. And then they also provide options for consideration on how to mitigate and reduce those vulnerabilities, creating that safe and secure environment for the house of worship.
So we've talked a little about this resource for faith communities and how important faith communities are, but faith communities have a lot of stuff to do on their plate. They're running daycare programs, there's soup kitchens, there's worship, there's taking care of people in life cycle events, all this different stuff. What is it about this moment that they should be making time for? I mean, how threatened are they anyway?
Well, if you think about our houses of worship and the risks to them, and there's three types of risks. There's the natural, severe weather. There's the accidental. Somebody, disconnects a wire, or, a cyber system goes down, or a camera. And then there's the intentional. And unfortunately, we have seen intentional attacks against houses of worship. We've had active shooter situations. We've had acts of vandalism. And by thinking about the safety and security of your house of worship and working with CISA, either by conducting a self-assessment of your facility, doing a walkthrough with CISA or the local police department, you're securing your house of worship, and you're keeping your congregation safe. You're keeping those other ministries that you have within your church, the soup kitchens, the daycares. They're all part of it. It is just not the worship service. It's a holistic approach.
Got it. And I don't mean to cause any unnecessary concern for our viewers, but how tangible is this? How real should this concern be for faith communities? I mean, some of our congregations range from tiny little congregations in little neighborhoods. Some of them are out in rural areas. Some are just the local storefront church, and everything in between. Some of them are very big, but does everybody have this? Why should we? It sounds like a good thing. We have only so many hours in the day. Why should we allocate some of our time to this focus?
Well,
it sounds important.
Unfortunately, these incidences have occurred. And if you look at history, where some of these incidents have happened, the Tree of Life Synagogue, and the Charleston Church, the small church in rural Texas. So unfortunately, we can't identify where the threat is going to occur. It can occur anywhere, anytime, any place. And by protecting ourselves and having plans on how to respond to an emergency, we are better prepared.
Got it. So as a faith institution that might be interested in working with CISA, is this stuff, I'm going to say, no further cost because the taxpayers have already paid for it once. Do we have to pay for it again, or is it available already? How do we get it? What's there and what do we get?
CISA offers resources. We have public-facing web pages that anyone can review and download material. We have training opportunities on those web pages for active shooters, bomb threats, how to develop an emergency action plan.
That's cool. Tell me about the training for a second. Do I call someone to make a training appointment, or it's on webinars? What are you doing?
So there are webinars available.
Great. Okay.
And also we are using YouTube. There are YouTube videos out there. Our Office of Bombing and Prevention has several, how to respond to a bomb threat, what to do if you receive a bomb threat.
Okay.
They're short videos. Anyone can watch them. Unfortunately, that has been a threat stream over the last several years where faith-based organizations have received bomb threats.
So it's a CISA YouTube channel? Is that how it works?
No, it's a CISA-produced video that can be found on YouTube.
So just search for CISA on YouTube and I can find it. Great.
Correct.
And I have looked at some of the handouts. They're very they're accessible, and they're not no disrespect to the government, but they're refreshingly brief. They're concise. They're just one page or two, and they seem really handy to use those. And those are also some of the free things that you can get, which is great.
Yes, and I think I would say that they're user friendly. You know, one of the tools that we did develop for houses of worship is a tool called the Power of Hello. And if you think about the word hello, it is a very powerful word. And you know, by training ushers, your congregation, greeters in the power of hello, using just that one word, you can create a conversation with somebody that may be a first-time visitor to your congregation. And you can develop a rapport with them.
Great. Well, that sounds very helpful indeed. It's terrific that those are free resources are available, and that this training is available. And this conversation, if someone in a faith community here listening on this program wanted to reach out to CISA, how do they do that? Is that all email these days? Do we still use phones? What's the best way to reach you?
I think email is probably the best way to contact us. Here in the Chicagoland area, we have 3 protective security advisors that are doing faith-based outreach. They can be contacted at CISA Region 5 .cisa.dhs.gov.
Okay. So they can, and that information is on the page somewhere if someone went to look at CISA and contact for here Metropolitan Chicago.
Yes.
And our whole area is Region 5.
Region 5 actually covers 5 states. It's Michigan, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Indiana, Illinois, Ohio. 6 states.
6 states. So we're all of Illinois here.
Yes,
right?
yeah, we cover Illinois.
That's good to hear. That's good to hear. And I think we have just to wrap up, is there sort of one recommendation or word of advice you'd give to our viewers about how to do this in a way that doesn't make people alarmed but makes people aware? How do we get there? 60 seconds.
I think the first thing is you have to assess what your risks are. You have to identify the critical areas within your house of worship. Develop an emergency action plan of how to protect the congregation, and then exercise and test that and train your staff, your volunteers, and your congregation. Start with things that have high probabilities of occurring. Sheltering in place for severe weather, a fire alarm. How would you respond to that? A medical emergency.
Great. Well, thank you. This has been really helpful. I'm glad you were able to join us, Chuck, and to share all this useful information. It's really very helpful. That was Chuck DuShane with CISA, and in a moment we'll learn about a new funding source from the state of Illinois that can help local congregations protect themselves. We'll be right back.
Metropolitan Chicago is one of the most religiously diverse areas in the world, and for more than a half-century, Sanctuary has reported and reflected on our faith-filled community. Sanctuary tells stories of faith from both inside our houses of worship to the streets and neighborhoods where faith is acted out every day with acts of kindness and concern. From food pantries to peace initiatives, from worship services to servicing the poor, Sanctuary has a proud history of reporting on the goodness that flows from our faith traditions. Watch Sanctuary every Sunday at 12 noon.
Welcome back to Sanctuary. I'm Nisan Chavkin, and we're talking about safety and security resources that are available to local faith communities. And for our next segment, I have the pleasure of welcoming Father Jerry Boland of Our Lady of Perpetual Help Catholic Church in Glenview. Father Boland, welcome to Sanctuary.
Thank you. Great to be here, Nisan.
Tell us a little bit about your church community and why you were thinking about security. I mean, are you in a, is the local youth group giving you trouble? What's going on?
Well, Our Lady of Perpetual Help is a large suburban community in Glenview, Illinois. We're just north of the city. Large congregation, the largest public Catholic school, and over time, with incidents happening in the neighborhood, every so often I would get, messages on the phone or disturbing letters, and you tended to just throw those away. Now you realize you've got to track these things to be careful.
Yeah.
So some years ago, Cook County has a program to help you do an emergency operations plan, which brought together the Glenview Police Department, the Fire Department, and Cook County. And it was the first time I got this idea of coordination. The more you're on the same page, the more effective you are in securing your worship space. You want to think of the church, the temple, the synagogue as a place of peace, a place that's an oasis in the midst of all these challenges. And it's heartbreaking to see faith communities targeted for whatever reasons. I remember when the conceal and carry law was passed, that we had to put, signs on all our front doors that you can't bring handguns, into church. And you would think, who would bring a handgun into a church for a service? But you have to protect yourself from some of these influences. So that got us going. And we started planning, reviewing our emergency operations plan every year. The representatives from the fire department, policeman department come. I have 112 employees. So every year we do an update and review of security procedures on campus. So, sometimes we can have 2,000 people on campus. So these resources in the community don't cost anything. It was just a matter of knowing that they were there and being able to connect with them.
I'm glad you brought that up, that connecting to the rest of the community, because so many times faith institutions see themselves as islands,
right?
And they are that they have to rely just on what they bring to the table, and yet police departments, fire departments, local city officials are often quite eager and interested in working with local faith communities, because you're always there.
Yeah.
You're an anchor in the community anyway, and they want your help. They want to help you. They want to be part of the solution and not necessarily an obstacle. And making those connections and starting that planning process, as your church has already done, is really helpful. And as you say, that part doesn't always cost money, of course, but there are things that do cost money.
Right.
And your church is one of more than 100 here in Illinois that were successful recipients of a new grant program that's conducted by the state. It's called the Illinois Nonprofit Security Grant Program, or NSGP. And it's a pool of money every year that congregations can apply for and get some funds to provide some of that extra money that normally doesn't come in from bingo or the raffle, right? So how did that, without compromising your security plan, what were you thinking? What did you imagine that you could do with that extra funds that you couldn't do just, sort of off the street from scratch?
So one of the things we did is we had a security audit done, just to see where are we at?
Who did that with you?
So we, the Archdiocese recommended a firm to come out, and they did a work through. I have 10 buildings on my campus, and there's all these soft entry and hard entry points, and it was very helpful. Again, we learned a lot of things that didn't cost anything. Making sure doors are closed, windows are shut, illuminating certain parts of the campus at night, cutting back some of the shrubbery that could be a place where people could hide. So that didn't cost anything. But then they began looking at other issues that we would have to invest in. And it can be very overwhelming for a church. We're trying to, keep the boiler going and paying the electric bill. And then when someone says that, I can outfit your church with a camera system for $300,000, you're like, I can't possibly. But what you could learn is, how do we gradually, we don't have to solve this overnight, but they came up with a very practical step-by-step process for the future. And then this grant came along. And I really would encourage any congregation to look into it. There's money, we received $150,000. Well, that's a lot of money to invest in infrastructure. As Mr. DuShane mentioned, a lot of this is infrastructure, and how can you continue to make your house of worship as safe as possible? So we've been able to hire a security officer who's there when the kids arrive in the morning, and there's a security officer until our religious set is finished. That has really brought great comfort to parents. Got all these cars dropping people on, picking up and taking up. So that was great. We have enhanced our camera system. It's amazing with this technology. On my phone, I have an app, and I can track any camera on my campus. If there was a police officer came and that saw suspicious activity within a certain time frame, it's amazing now how easy that is to do.
Tell me more about this phasing, because I think that's, we look at a lot of problems in life, but particularly in congregations, and say, oh golly, that's so big, we can never fix it, so let's just pretend it doesn't exist. But if you take a slice and another slice, did you have help designing it? Did you figure that out as a parish? Did you bring in some people to think it through? And how did you decide what do we got to do right now, and what can wait till year 2 or year 3 or year 4? Because that's
a very important consideration. And the security audit did a phase-in proposal for us and had all sorts of recommendations to different vendors that all came out to present proposals. Anything that we install is hopefully seamless with new technology. Because these things, in 2 months, all of a sudden, the great camera system you have is out of date. So how do we do this? How do we maximize things like apps, control of the data and the information? Right now with our emergency operation plan, the police department they know where people are at. It's 7 o'clock on Tuesday, and there's we have to evacuate the campus. Where are people? Well, there's the 8th grade the basketball team is in the gym, the Bible study group is upstairs, the women's knitting group is in the basement of the church. So they know we would have never had that precise information available to the police department. Getting staff people always thinking about, if you see something, say something. Much rather have something checked out and find out it was not a big deal than to say, gee, I should have called somebody. I find people very appreciative of the efforts of making our campus more secure. And this grant is a golden opportunity for a congregation to get some investment in basic security measures for your church. Also finding out, if we trim back some bushes, if we're more cognizant of who's got access to the building, being able to identify employees in the school. If there's someone walking around that doesn't have the appropriate lanyard on, you have to call somebody. You're not the police officer, but nobody should be roaming around inside the school that isn't got a security clearance. So it's just an attitude. We have next fall, we're going to have a weekend where we're going to have a fire drill in the church. Like, where do you go if you had to evacuate the church?
This is like what Mr. DuShane was talking about, that there are things that, of course, our kids practice in school twice a year, according to, I think, or at least according to the law. They practice. And once we practice, it doesn't mean that they think there's going to be a fire every single day, but they know what to do if the bell goes off, right? And it sounds like your congregation has made that shift to thinking about that little extra set of questions in their mind.
Right, and we want our buildings to be accessible, especially our churches. And we want people to feel that they're entering the house of the Lord and that they can find peace. And that it's just unfortunate we live at a time where you just have to be thinking more systematically about public safety. It sounds
like your congregation has, they don't sound like they're blocked behind the church doors and paranoid. They've figured out how to balance that. Was there some message when you were talking with the leadership of the church and the congregation about how to find that balance spot that you found effective? Was there some way that how they frame it so that it's not, security doesn't become their overwhelming concern, it just becomes part of what they do? How does that work?
Well, I find transparency. People appreciate information. Like if you just started installing all this equipment without telling people what you were doing, they would think, what does Father Boland know? There must be some terrible thing about to happen. But when you involve the parish council and you communicate to the parish at large about some of the security measures we're implementing, I always get, thank you. Thank you, Father, for your leading us on this or making our campus safe. I haven't had anybody say, what a waste of time, or why are you spending all this money? It's more gratitude particularly because of the number of children we have and vulnerable adults.
Sure.
We have to think through, what would you have to do if you evacuate the church and you have 10 people in wheelchairs?
Right. How do you get the people with wheelchairs? And how do the people who have limited sight? How do we take care of those who can't move quickly? How do we take care of kids who don't always understand what's going on? Critically important.
We have situations now, nowadays, somebody gets up in the middle of a service and is screaming or yelling or appearing to be threatening. It's important for the presider and for some people, the ushers, to know what to do in that situation, rather than just say, well, I hope nothing happens.
Right.
You just have to be more conscious, I guess.
Conscious and to figure out that maybe that person's just having a bad day, and how not to but not to under, but just to find that balance. It sounds like your congregation has done that. 30 seconds. How did you find out about this? Was it through the Archdiocese? Was it through the state?
Actually, I found out about it through the Glenview Police Department. They sent a link to all the pastors in our area. Now, it's not for the faint of heart. These applications, are challenging, but hang in there. In the Chicagoland area for the Archdiocese, they were very helpful because there's all sorts of numbers you need and things for the application. But if you just hang in there, it's very easy to make a case for the grant. And this is money that could make the big difference of beginning to invest in a system to enhance the security of your worship space. And the grant is there, and as I understanding, it's a continuing grant. So if you haven't applied yet, you can.
It'll be every year. The new grant for Illinois will be coming out, I expect, in the coming, at the turn of the year, early 2024, if not sooner. And you can go to the IEMA webpage, which will appear on our screens shortly. So thank you so much, Father Boland, for sharing your experience and encouraging other communities to follow your example. So I want to say thanks to Mr. Charles DuShane, our Protective Security Advisor for Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency of the United States Department of Homeland Security, and to Father Jerry Boland, pastor of Our Lady of Perpetual Help Catholic Church in Glenview, for being our guest today. You can find out more information about resources from CISA and from the Illinois Nonprofit Security Grant Program on the web links shown on your screen. For IEMA, you can also sign up to have an email so that they can send you notification when the grant is ready. I want to thank everyone who has been watching today for joining us here on Sanctuary. And until next time, we wish you good health and peace.
Metropolitan Chicago is one of the most religiously diverse areas in the world, and for more than a half-century, Sanctuary has reported and reflected on our faith-filled community. Sanctuary tells stories of faith from both inside our houses of worship to the streets and neighborhoods where faith is acted out every day with acts of kindness and concern. From food pantries to peace initiatives, from worship services to servicing the poor, Sanctuary has a proud history of reporting on the goodness that flows from our faith traditions. Watch Sanctuary every Sunday at 12 noon